Good evening. We here? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, my name's Keith Clark, Construction Area Limited. We're here to talk about net zero, and that's getting people to get climate change. And actually, this is not for you, because you're already here. This is for about 400,000 people in our industry who need to get climate change to understand why it's going to change their industry. And the reason that's important is that it's fantastic having leaders like you who come to the future build. It does not get you to a net zero economy by 2050 or 80% by 2030 or anywhere near it. Exemplars do not get there. We're talking about the entire built environment. Transport, buildings, infrastructure, energy supply, all being decarbonized at a phenomenal rate. And what we're looking at here is something that allows people to assimilate. And climate change is a fundamentally different issue from sustainability, social equality, gender equality. It's far more complex. And it's not actually reasonable to expect a project manager, he or she's got a big project, they've got staff to worry about, their boss is a pain, the client's being difficult, it's Friday night, it's rain, the stuff was late, to worry about decarbonising their entire industry and assimilate the science, the climate, the biodiversity, the technology trends, the risk, the rate of change, which is revolutionary, the reporting of complex issues, how media deals with climate change. Right now, 80% of the social media on climate change is done by bots, and it's anti-climate science. That's the media you're being fed. Why should I be able to assimilate that and change my industry? There are massive threats. The financial market is moving at a phenomenal rate, and. So the idea of this is to give people an experiment. How to engage with those who are not here. How to lift and give that assimilation in an easy fashion to the rest of your company. And I dare say it to your board. Most of the senior management teams I talk to, even those who are issuing net zero carbon policies, when you peel back the cover, half of them can't spell climate change. They think it's like CSR. It's something to the edge of their business. This is fundamental to your business. This changes your business. It's an opportunity to your business, and it's a massive threat to whether you can hire staff or not and keep your clients. So this is an experiment we've got running. We have a long way to go of how people get it. It's an iterative platform. It's to give you a landscape to allow all people to get it. And there was a censored slide here which said, Thatcher got it. Margaret Thatcher got climate change. Tony Blair got climate change. Donald Trump is too stupid to get climate change, and Boris Johnson can't be bothered to get climate change. It's a bit of a worry. Our industry needs to actually get climate change in a way we can assimilate and accept the changes that will happen to us. It is a fantastic opportunity. It is also fantastically urgent. And with that, oh, here we go. It did come up. Yeah, Boris can't be bothered. Our industry can. And actually, all the decarbonisation routes, all the scenarios in the COP, in the UN climate change report, every single one requires the built environment to radically decarbonise at a rate of change we have never achieved before. There are no scenarios with a magic bullet. We are fundamental to this. So our industry, I firmly believe, can, but it means all of them. And with that, I'm going to introduce Martin Wright. We call him Content Czar. Actually, he's been putting together this with our consultants on net zero. This is an experiment. If it really works, we're going to give it away. So this is a not-for-profit. We do experiential learning. This is to actually look at how we engage the industry. This is not a profit-making enterprise. It is something for the industry. Martin, all yours.
Keith? Oh, is it the right-hand clicker?
Yeah.
Lovely, super. Hello, yes, I'm Martin Wright, and I'm painfully aware I am the only thing standing between you and the industrial quantity of free drinks that's all out there. So I will be brief. Yes, net zero. Here it is. It basically does what it says on the tin. Teaches people about climate change within the construction sector, and specifically about net zero pathways and progress towards net zero. We start off by saying, right, we've got a problem here, destroying an area of forest the size of Belgium every year, and I always think if you're going to burn down something the size of Belgium, what's wrong with Belgium? But nonetheless, we have to think about how the construction sector, like every other sector, can be part of the solution. There's our wacky construction guy thinking about it. Solution, we build a net zero future. Hooray, easy, kind of becoming rapidly, in quite a good way, something of a cliche. It used to be motherhood and apple pie. It's now motherhood, apple pie, and net zero. Unless you're Donald Trump, nobody disagrees that net zero is a good idea. Even just a couple of years ago, net zero was something quite novel, something quite cool. Now it's rapidly becoming compulsory. Governments are legislating for it, clients are demanding it. Pretty soon it's going to be something like health and safety. Yeah, you have to have a net zero target. So what does it mean in practice? You have to understand what it means in practice. If you work in any kind of sector of the economy, construction included, big climate impact in construction, as you all know. So understanding how you get there is essential, but it's not just about understanding how you get there, because if net zero construction is really going to take off, it also has to be inspiring, it has to be exciting. People who work in the sector have to get it, but they also have to get excited by it, something that makes them want to get up in the morning. So where do you go to for that? Where do you go for sources of information? If you're a company, you want your 20,000 staff to learn about net zero, where do you send them? Well, the good news is there's no shortage of information and materials out there. When I started doing a bit of research with Keith on all this, I thought, I wonder how much there is. In fact, I was drowning in the stuff. There's a huge amount of information out there. Some of it's great, some of it's less so. Some of it you need a bloody degree in atmospheric science to get your head around. Quite a lot of it, to be honest, if you don't live and breathe this stuff like you do, it's a wee bit dull, it's a wee bit stodgy, and even if it's interesting, which quite a lot of it is, I don't want to be rude about it, probably half of you have been writing some of this content yourself, even if it's interesting, it's not necessarily presented in a way that is that digestible, particularly for people who don't have a lot of time. They're not going to sit down at a laptop for an hour and go through a careful, whole series of modules about it. They want to look at something quickly while they're in between meetings, while they're on the train, while they're waiting for their kids at the school gates, or whatever. So rather than sort of completely reinvent the wheel and think, right, we have to come up with our own enormous quantity of modules on this, we've come up with the idea for a net zero hub. Essentially taking the essentials of net zero, putting them in one place, making them interesting, making them digestible. And we're imagining it to be something like this. So there is Climate for Construction, the learning hub for the built environment. That's the heart of it, helping people get a grip of what's going on, get inspired, skill up to be part of the future that's coming our way, whether we like it or not. We'll design it in such a way that content will be delivered to you depending on your experience, depending on your sector, using cunning algorithms that our guys here at Creative Tweed, our developers, have designed. We'll ask you some questions early on. Don't get too hung up, by the way, on the precise words we've got on this. This is just an illustration to show you how it might work. All this is negotiable in terms of detail to make sure that the people who we want to use it are going to find it useful, are going to find it relevant. So just to sort of whiz through to give you a quick idea, you'll be logging on to this, you'll be coming back into it, you'll see prompts to stuff you were looking at before, prompts where the algorithm says, right, you really need to go through the Climate Change 101 module, for example, and make sure you understand it. And you'll get sections of recommended playlists, need to know stuff, what's trending, what you saved as a playlist. You might be really, really interested in procurement stuff. You might be really, really interested in existing housing development solutions that are out there. It's adopting a kind of Spotify-style approach so that people can both make their own playlists but also get recommended different routes to navigate through it. So it makes it user-friendly, it makes it fairly seamless, it hopefully makes it reasonably entertaining as well. And then in terms of content, it's going to be a mixture of some content which we will originate ourselves, and some content, probably the bulk of the content, will be curated stuff, the very best stuff that there is out there on NetZero, and we'll weave it together so it makes sense as a whole. So the idea is that this hub will be the one place that you're able to come to, the one place you really need to come to if you're in construction and you need to know about net zero and climate change. You can see we've got media players that support different types of content. A lot of people, over 60%, it says their internet usage now mobile. People do masses of stuff on their mobile. Any kind of learning module has got to work on a mobile, so that's why we've designed it like that. And you can get alerts that will bring you up to speed with what the latest is, when there's new information around a topic you're particularly interested in, that will be on there. And it'll be in the form both of video, podcasts. We all love podcasts now, massive growth in podcasts, really good way of communicating sometimes slightly tricky to digest information in a reasonably simple series of bites, as it were, that you can listen to while you're doing your exercises or having a bath or whatever. And some written content for old-fashioned blokes like me that love written content. In terms of the broad sweep of content structure, it's going to be stuff around net zero and climate change in general, net zero and climate change as it impacts on the construction sector, what's going on in terms of government initiatives, in terms of industry initiatives. We'll have plenty about finance. We'll have stuff about the way climate change is communicated, influence of latest thinking on behavior change. It's obviously hugely influential in terms of the ways choices are made about new developments. Plenty of success stories and case studies, a degree of drilling down into some of the nuts and bolts of construction and climate change, and something I always really like doing, projecting ourselves into the future and saying, okay, what does a net zero future look like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? What do you see as you walk down the street? So we'll have some of that as well. I always think it's a nice way to get people excited about it. So that's the flavour of it. I'm going to hand over to Keith, who is going to pretend to be Julia Stevens, CEO of Constructionarium, talk to you about next steps. Keith.
Yeah, apologies, you got 4 white males. Julia, who actually runs Constructionarium, was sick today, to her great annoyance and our distress, and she is fantastic. We've been running Constructionarium, which is experiential learning for civil engineering students, for 16 years up in Norfolk. We're expanding that now to do with low carbon. This is, our next steps on this are very simple. We're engaging with about 10 major companies at the moment, and any company here that wants to engage, we're going to look to you to develop the curriculum. So we'll come out, meet you and say, this is the sort of curriculum we're looking at, not the content, but the curriculum. If your staff had access to that via a social media, and they can do it on the bus, they can do it in the elevator coming up and down, they can do it without going off for a conference, that will take them through an assimilation of climate change issues that would lift their discussion so they can read what's in the Telegraph and make sense. And they can understand why your corporate body have said, I now have a new sustainability policy. It's to do with climate change. Why it's different from CSR. We will then take that, develop it into modules, and then look at where we get the content from. If we can then make that work, we'll find a way of someone hosting it, and it will be self-supported. If we can't make it work, we'll have learned some lessons which we'll distribute to the industry. All the institutional professional bodies are looking at CPD now, and if we can learn about the content stuff here that would assist them, and that's the failure, fantastic. If it becomes a useful tool for the people that would not come to Future Build, it will be fantastic. And we haven't got much time. So the idea is we would have this, if it works, we'll have that engagement during this time between now and Easter. After that, we'll look to, we've got some funding, we've got about 100K of funding now, private funding, no government, nothing with a return, all donations, that will then take us to the next level, and we get that out in the industry. then it should drive itself. If it doesn't, we'll do a session next year at this showing why it didn't work. So that's the idea of net zero. It's about climate change, and it's about speed, and it's about an industry that will be different in 12 months than it is today. Questions, or do you want to go and get a drink? Sounds like you want to get a drink. That's it. Thank you, Robin. And you've got the email of Julia. If not, grab me afterwards, and we've got about, yeah.
It's great to see this next development. The question I have for you, because you always say that we have to be allowed to fail,
Yeah.
which I like. But at what point do you go live in terms of the range of people who need this is so huge? Do you start with white van women, or do you start with engineers, or do you start with contractors, big or little?
Great
or is there a little bit for everybody?
The first thing we're doing, we hope to be interviewing, we expect to be having sessions now with a major material supplier, a major tier 2 contractor, a major tier 1 contractor, and 3 major design firms. Okay, so they're actually lined up. And we hope to have Bentley, who are here somewhere, I've lost you, Bentley, who do, there you are. We're going to be talking to them because they supply software to the industry. So they're an interesting vehicle as well. So we're going to talk to all of those. And one of the virtues of this sort of Spotify, so you go into it and you end up, instead of watching cats playing piano, you end up looking at how a joke on social media about how it reports climate change deniers. So the idea is, if we can get that landscape with the right algorithm, we might be able to cover eventually all of those audiences, because you walk through your landscape. So your interest and your appetite determines where you go. We then might condition that, so if we have a major material supplier, might want all his counter people to actually do modules 9, X, J, and F, okay? Because that's part of their CPD. So they can sign up to that and say, Robin, you should do, what you should do is how to communicate CO2e to customers who are white van men. You're a counter person, that's what you should, I'm asking you to do that as part of your training in my firm. So it can be bespoke by your industry or by your sector. We think there's enough content there to boil the ocean. The idea is to make the content really sharp, really sharp. How many people here have read the 1.5 degree IPCC report last October? Apart from us, okay, 3 of us, 4 of us, okay? 5 of us, that's pretty damn good, okay? That was written for politicians to be able to read, and if that's a pretty low bar, right? That really is a low bar. And 5 of us have done it. I don't expect, when I run Atkins, 18,500 people who are making money for me and my shareholders, by the way, and have got a utilisation I have to meet to stay solvent and make my £70 million a week wage bill. I don't want them reading the IPCC report, because they'd have to read 30 other reports to understand what the hell is going on. I need them to understand what that meant for their business. And that's the key. But I expect also the 4-person on a site who's being told by Innovate UK and Transforming Construction as a new way of doing business, as modular manufacturing techniques, as BIM version 98. It's all coming different. I expect them to be able to be educated as well. It is not fair not to include them. So the white van person is as important as the engineer. Different, but important. And in the new world, they're even more important, because they deliver. We might design, they deliver. So I think that is the ambition. It will be an interesting journey. That's it. Sorry, one other question. Hey, 2 questions. Way to go. Whoa.
Hi. I just wonder how you prevent or deal with manufacturers coming into the platform and stop it being sort of taken over by greenwash and the things that we sort of see?
Good question.
Yeah, and how you tailor the content to that.
One of the things that Martin and I and Creative Tweed, Creative Tweed have been fantastic on this, actually, to give them credit, because we want this iterative, gamey, sort of infographic type way. So except for a second, we're going to hit that quality level. Now you have this content issue. And one of the reasons we will set up what I would call a curriculum board, a content board, and it won't be people from the industry, by and large. It will be people like educational psychologists, behavioral psychologists, scientists, communicators, not manufacturers and not institutions. So not people with the proverbial axe to grind. So you can't get on it unless we let you on it. So it has to be workable, assimilable, and true. So we'll have effectively an independent board. And you've thought about it more than me.
Yeah, I mean, there will be an editorial function in this, an interventionist editorial function. And if myself or anyone like me has got anything to do with it, there'd be absolutely no place for greenwash. The only bit of greenwash we'd include is a good example of how not to do it.
And I think the quality issue here, and particularly the communication of climate science and probability curves, you know, there is some fantastic stuff. Miles Allen, who presented here last year, I don't know if he's here this year, fantastic, succinct summary of the science, and that it's science, okay? It's not a religion, it's not a belief, it's science, okay? Get over it, guys, it's called science. We don't teach science anymore. So those issues we will deal with. Adverts, no. Professional institutions, grinding an axe, no. We will have to deal with the media issues. You know, why does Fox News present ridicule about climate science? We've had Clive Murray give a lecture on that. This is really important to understand how media, actually, how many people here have ever had any media training and how to communicate in the media? Anyone had professional training? 3 of us, okay? There is a lot to learn. Trust me, there is a lot to learn. It's not about being right, it's about giving people a story that's a good enough story to be published or put on the internet that's also true by the time it's gone through that. And that's a skill that you have to be taught. And it's a skill you have to know to read what's really going on. So that's why we have a journalist. Martin's a journalist, not a contractor. Very important. He is not an engineer or an architect or a QS. And it will come from outside the industry, which is why I'm dead keen. Bentley are here, because they're kind of outside the industry. They're digital people. This is really exciting, or frightening, or both. It should be both.
And fun.
And it should be fun. We are going to put some comedy stuff on it as well, actually. Just because, you know, there's some good jokes out there. Why not? Thank you very much. End of the day, I'm quite impressed. Thank you very much indeed.